Hello, beloveds, and welcome to another episode of the Enlightened Podcast. I'm your host, Luyanda Khumbuza, and welcome to HR Deep Dive. So I did mention when we started off the season that this, next 2 months, we're speaking all things planning, goal setting, and workplace readiness. And when I tell you, the finest and the best caliber of women are from KZN, was on call. After today, it was on call. I'd like to introduce our guest, Zanele Njapha, that's popularly known as the UnLearning Lady on all social media platforms. Welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Luyanda.
It's such an honor. You have no idea, guys. Ever since I met her, I started following her work. I've been such a big fan of all that you do, and I just want to see you grow and prosper and continue to help, everyone. I think you, the perfect epitome of lift as you rise.
Aww.
You're one of the very few people that come to mind when I think lift as you rise.
Oh, thanks.
And I'm so happy that we get to have you here and my audience can, learn and sip from your well of wisdom.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you. Let's get straight into it. Tell us about yourself, where you're from, and how did the UnLearning Lady term come about?
Cool. So I am originally from KZN, and for those of us who don't know, it's on the southern coast, specifically in South Africa. And I was born and bred in Durban. So that's where I've been my entire life. And I mean, I did some study abroad opportunities, but basically everything was in KZN.
Yeah.
And I did a bit of teaching. So my undergrad education was in education specifically, but I did undergrad. I mean, I did a study abroad in educational psychology. So I did that for about 3 years. The teaching thing, loved it. Huge passion of mine.
Of course, I can imagine.
Love children. and after doing that, I got to a place where I thought, okay, I think it's time to go elsewhere. I felt myself over almost, when you put on a tight shoe and you're like, I need to take this off because I need to breathe. Hey. So it was something eganjalo, and I took that shoe off, and then I went into the work that I do now. The positioning, however, was around unlearning because it was drawing on my expertise and experience. But the UnLearning Lady wasn't born at the time. And right at the beginning, when I was starting off, I used to wear this really big hair wig, and then I started to, and I decided I was going to take it off. I was just going to do something completely new with my short hair. And people started to get a bit confused because I hadn't quite created a brand where people recognized my face, but they recognized this hair. And so they went, okay, we want the UnLearning Lady. We see this lady, but we want the one with the big hair. So they started using the UnLearning Lady to say that we know there's someone who speaks about unlearning, but they're a lady. They don't quite look like this person we see now. But, and so that through that continuous use, then the term UnLearning Lady was born. And I guess it's just sort of caught on, right?
I love it. I love it so much. I mean, it's such an attention catcher for me because I was like, UnLearning Lady, okay, I want to know more, right? It's like you stay on the profile because you want to like, okay, why UnLearning Lady? And I think we are in the perfect time of the year to unlearn. And you also say that you teach people how to relearn certain things. And the biggest buzzwords right now in this time of the year are your planning, your goal setting, workplace readiness, right?
Yeah.
What does workplace readiness mean to you? What does it look like in your office as you begin to prepare for 2025?
Cool. Specifically for me, workplace readiness is almost both mental or psychological and also physical, right? It's more logistical, it's more systematic. So if we're speaking about the one sense, it means I have, and I'm going to be very cheesy here, but it means I have almost let go of my holiday mode version of myself. And I've jumped into the mindset of work, the mindset of productivity, the mindset of the vision of where we're going as an organization. Because I mean, this year specifically, to speak to my team, we start our financial year in March, but already from Jan, everyone is clocked in to get ready because we've got a big year coming up. And so on the mindset side, it means, are you in tune with our vision? And you've come out of that holiday mode, which obviously rest and everything else continues, but just tuning your brain in. And then the logistical side or the systematic side is, do you have all the tools that you need? Are you logged back onto all of our dashboards? All those types of things. Do you have a machine that can still serve you and work well? So for me, workplace readiness, whether we're applying it to us at the Unlearners or anywhere else really, it's almost taking those two parts together to say, am I workplace ready? Is my psyche ready? Have I unlearned? I mean, one of the pieces of work I get to do quite a lot lately is with grads. And I get called in a lot to work with grads because it's Zanele, help them to unlearn this idea that I used to be a student and this was taken care of for me.
And the lecturer knows my name.
Yes.
And,
life just works, right? But help them to now move over and to understand that there are ways of seeing, doing, and being that they may have had before when they were grads that here are not going to fly.
Sure.
And so that's pretty much what it is for me. The workplace readiness is those two things in combination.
A huge part of our audience, one, are people that are within jobs now that definitely apply to. Let's speak to the job seekers. What does workplace readiness look like for somebody that's saying, I am applying, I want to land a job this year, and what does this process now look for them?
Sure. So let's use those two categories.
Two measures,
So that we keep it nice and consistent. On the one side, I would say the easier part would be the systemic logistical thing. So obviously having things like whether it's your resume, your CV, everything set up, you've got sponsors that can speak well,
and you are applying.
Exactly, right? You're doing what you need to do in terms of your actions. So that's the one. And I mean, people like you would be able to say exactly what those things are. Doesn't fall necessarily within my scope, but I think that's the one part. And then the other part then becomes, am I the kind of person that is almost hireable, if that was a word, right? Because that's what it is to be workplace ready in a psychological, mental, that type of space. Is, am I ready? Am I in the mind space of someone who is ready to jump in and get going?
And contribute value.
Exactly, right? Am I the type of person that if I was to jump in now, I would be a valuable member of the team?
Love that.
And one question that I heard I thought was mind-blowing is, would I be the type of person that my manager would rehire if they had an opportunity to do so? And so you almost want to ask that
yourself,
question, right? Yeah.
As you prepare. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. In the process of unlearning, for you, specifically when you were transitioning from being a teacher to now building your own business, what was the big challenge that you even now, as you begin to go into organizations, you see, you go to, what is the biggest challenge that you see for yourself, one, and also that you see with the people that you've worked with or talent that you've worked with when it comes to unlearning?
Wow, that's such a good question. I would say, and I often say this, Luyanda, but I think there's still so much truth to it. It's the idea of this duality. I mean, we grow up in a world where it's top down, left, right, black, white, everything else. And everything is very linear in how we look at it. And that means, and very much like research says, we are stuck in this loop of thinking 90% of the exact same thoughts.
Yeah.
But that's not, I was a teacher, now I'm a consultant. It's opening up your perspective to understand that there are so many different ways that life can look, that people can execute, that business models can take shape. And just being the kind of person who says, yes, I get that that's how it was done. Yeah. But I know that there's so much more over and above that. And I find that both in my journey, but also in the primary school space and in the teaching space where I was, but also now currently in the corporate space, it's just still that stuckness or not being able to even entertain the idea that there's something beyond what I see now. And that I just feel like is a switch that sometimes things like trauma and other things just for some people might switch it on for them. But that I would say was probably the biggest thing, hey?
Between 2020 and now, we've seen a lot of trends take place, unravel, come up. We introduced to AI, technology, and all these, amazing things, if we look at it in a positive perspective, right, in the workplace. What have these trends, or what does it mean for an individual in terms of unlearning and relearning when it comes to adapting to all these changes in the workplace?
Yeah, I think a big part of it, right, is the awareness, but then also the practice side of it. And the awareness comes with the readiness, right? It's about understanding where you are in terms of what you can handle. We had a recent workshop the other day, and I was telling everyone in the workshop to almost think about the things that you want as if they were a baby that you had to hold. So often, when you've got a little baby and then one of your cousins who's probably like 6 years old said, oh, can I hold the baby? And you're like, I don't know and so you want to hand the baby over. You want to be that
protective.
But then you're sort of still there, right? Yeah. And this is the big idea when it comes to this question is, when you are sort of preparing yourself here, you almost want to ask with awareness is, do I have the capacity in terms of how I see the world, how I see myself, how I perceive others,
True.
how I let go of what I've always known? Do I have the capacity to do that, or am I still limited in how I see things and in what I practice?
Yeah.
So that's the awareness part of it, understanding what is it that how do I almost shed a light of self-awareness around myself and around some of my biggest mindsets, and almost assessing that, right? We have a framework that we call the NRA framework, is the noticing. And I often say with the noticing, there's two things to notice. One, it's the facts, and two, it's the inference. Because what human beings do, and we call the schema in educational psychology, is we take our schema and our mental models and we interject them with the facts so that it looks like that's actually what's happening.
It's true.
But there's a good chance it's probably not, right? You are taking the two, mixing them together and telling yourself, oh no, she stepped on my foot in the bus, it means she hates me.
Yeah.
She didn't see you, firstly. It's okay, maybe just relax. So it's the noticing, right? And then the second part of it, which is the practice. So one, raise those levels of awareness. And then secondly, and that's what I think COVID really helped us to do, right? Is it gave us an opportunity to really be aware of some of the deeper conditioning and mental models and patterns that we have around how we think and how we perceive the world. And especially if you had a hard time letting go of what you've always known life to be, then your self-awareness levels really increased and peaked there. And then in terms of the practice, just to sort of end this off, would be the reframing. And understanding how to reframe. You said something so beautifully a little bit earlier on, but it's understanding that if we really do want to create the future that we want to build, it is all about leveraging the past that we have and saying, how does that past then serve the future that I'm trying to build? And reframing is one of the ways that we can do that.
Sure. You know, when I think of, because I don't know if it's because I'm in HR, but the word unlearning is a big thing currently, right? With all the changes that are happening, with the educational, qualifications that we have becoming redundant so quickly.
Yes.
There's a huge call to unlearn and relearn at a very fast pace, right? So I put it as one of the top key skills when we recruit is that what is how quick is your ability to unlearn and relearn, you know? So ngibeka lapha no emotional intelligence, adaptability, and soft skills, because I think those are the key skills when it comes to what we look for in the workplace. How do you think that, or how do you see the focus of these skills, emotional intelligence and learning adaptability, changing now in the workplace?
Yeah, I think there's a huge trend, and I mean, you would know this, Luyanda, a huge trend towards those skills being so key. And I often say that learning, unlearning, and relearning is the meta skill, because everything else almost falls part of that, right? Because if an individual in a world that, and I often say that our world is changing faster than you can say the word change. If you think about the pace of generative AI now, experts are telling us that in the next 10 years, we won't be able to recognize the workplaces we have. They won't look anything like what we have today. And so if an individual is scared by that idea, that's a great thing. But let it scare you into action.
Ooh.
And that's often what I say, right? And that's the process of unlearning is self-disrupting. And I had a client once who described it that way, and I thought it was brilliant, because that's what it is. And when you think about skills like adaptability, being able to self-challenge, being flexible, all of those types of things, right? It's about an individual who can self-disrupt, who can, introspect and go, oh, I see the world like this. I've got colleagues who differ to me in age, and here's how I perceive that. But how do I internally, without waiting for HR and L&D and R&D to intervene, how do I disrupt those mental models to serve where the organization is going, instead of looking just specifically at myself and my professional trajectory that I want for myself? How do I align that to where the organization is going, and then self-disrupt to move along in that path?
So, Zanele, a big part of the work that I do on this platform is I want to hold my audience accountable. As much as organizations and government and whoever else may have a responsibility, I always say you've also got an equal responsibility. And this is your career at the end of the day, right? The building of discovery stands, whether you're there or not. But what happens to your career and the plan that you may have for that? So when we look at now our organizations, how can they now start fostering that culture of continuous learning and learning and relearning so that they stay future ready?
Cool. So I think there's a few different things that organizations can do. So on the one side is you're looking at your L&D, which is now almost needing to recreate what learning programs look like, right? And so, I mean, things like micro learning, learning on the go, all of those types of learning models that mirror the trends we see
today,
on even social media. I mean, if you look at how, and yes, they say that long form content will always be queen, but if we think about also how people are consuming right? Our attention spans, those types of things are showing us that we really do just want bite size, right? So that's the first part, is learning and development professionals are now needing to create their programs to better support the unlearning and relearning professional. Because it's one thing, and I see this quite a lot, where, you know, we come into an organization and we speak about the learning and unlearning process, but we understand, or we start to see that the system within the company actually doesn't support unlearners. So by the time we turn around and we leave as a team, you know, people are going, okay, L&D, so you guys going to help us? And they're like, nah. So that's the one part, right? Is L&D creating programs that support that fast pace? Because an unlearner is someone who's going to need to have access to that information when they need it, but also in that form. And then the second one, probably most exciting, is the HR space. I often say nobody is under as much stress in any organization right now as HR. I mean, we can speak to the tech and the CIOs, but the HR firm is under so much, or the function of HR is under so much stress at the moment. So if we're thinking about HR, it's a conversation of how do we, within any given organization, create an ecosystem where, and a colleague of mine calls it a bionic business, where the business has such a beautiful integration of your AI and your technology with your humanness, so that individuals are able to learn on the go, they're able to understand where the business is going, but in relation to themselves, because we do have still to this very day a huge scare, right, around where technology is going and whether we will still have our jobs. So HR professionals are almost needing to play that combined role, which is probably why HR fatigue is a very, very real thing. It's because it's that combination of, yes, we need to make sure that everyone feels seen and we've got the great programs that are managing anxiety, but it also means we are the people that are responsible for making sure that this organization have people who have the capacity to hold where this company is going. And that's a huge responsibility.
So what do you think would be the best strategy or strategies maybe that individuals can use to become more change ready, both in maybe their personal, even professional lives, given, you know, the discussions that we've had from the beginning?
I think there's so much that individuals can do, right? But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to what we do as individuals on a consistent basis, right? I often say that if I was to ask each and every individual, whether it's in any given room, to take their shoes and socks off, we run around the building, turn it into a competition. When I ask that question in a room full of individuals, very few people put their hands up. But then when I ask the people who put their hands up to share why, they say it's because I've trained. And that's the thing, right? Unlearning and relearning and being a change-ready person or an adaptable individual means you've trained your brain for adaptability. Because you can only bring the brain that you've trained to your organization, to your team, to your family. And so the best thing, or one of the best things to do, is to find different ways within your personal life. And I have a very simple framework. I call it switch, shift, shuffle, where, and on a consistent basis within your own personal space, but even within your little desk or cubicle at work, you can just be building that mental agility so that your brain has built a habit out of letting go of one way of doing things and grabbing hold onto something else. So to describe that really quickly so people can put it into practice and we can hold them accountable, like you say. So switch is all about asking yourself, what's the consistent way I've been doing something, and how do I switch it over? Really quick example around that is the toothbrush and how we brush our teeth or brush our hair. If you're consistently grabbing your toothbrush with your right hand, and maybe that's your dominant hand, right? But on every now and again, even if it's a Wednesday switch or a Saturday switch, if you want to tie it into, you know, that particular routine, then you just switch in that way, just every now and again, right, to build that mental agility. And what we're seeing in research is that individuals who actually build mental agility or mental adaptability are actually less prone to degenerative illnesses like your Alzheimer's over time. But most of us are sitting there, thinking we're living 60 years, but we're just doing 20 years 3 times over, just being the same person over and over again. So that switch shift is all about moving your environment around, seeing how, and most of us can openly confess that we've had the same bedroom set up for probably 20 years or 10 years.
Every time you move, that bed be in the same position.
Right there. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because the brain wants to create shortcuts for ease and for safety as well, because that's what familiarity does for us. It decreases anxiety. But one thing I often recommend is start with a pot plant. Just move one tiny thing around in your room on a monthly basis. For the month, it's just going to be the pot plant. It's going to move from here to that corner, and that's just pretty much what you do. And then the very last one is shuffle. So switch, shift, shuffle is all about your routine. And that's the big one, right?
We hold on to that, girl.
Don't we love our routines? So shuffle is all about asking yourself, what's a tiny piece of my routine that has been set in a particular way that helps me feel safe, that I really, really treasure, but how do I switch it up? I often say one of the tiniest ways to do this is to think about your routine when you wake up in the morning. Do you shower first, and then you have your oats, and it's probably
or do you
always
take your
oats, and then
first?
Right? So shuffle is all about saying, maybe let me switch the showering with the breakfast. Just a tiny little thing. And just let that disrupt you. Because oftentimes what we do, right, is we lean away from the disruption. When actually the way that the brain creates those neural pathways and creates that agility or the capacity to be agile is through leaning into disruption and saying, I'm here. It's okay. I feel scared. I'm nervous, but I'm going to do this.
Guys, my dad needs to listen to this. He does not eat. I need to challenge him. I love that. And I think we've spoken so much about the things that we need to do, but I always say that it all starts up here. It all starts and ends up here. What are some of the mindset shifts that are necessary that we need to have if we want to become avid unlearners and relearners and keep abreast with everything that's happening in the workplace?
The biggest one, and I think this is probably the only one worth mentioning, is that I can't. It's that whole old dogs can't learn new tricks thing. It's a lie. It's a lie. And I mean, many of us have heard of the idea of neuroplasticity, and we throw it around, the brain's capacity to change based on demand. But actually what most people don't understand is just how real that is. But further to that is that neuroplasticity actually comes in 3 different forms that are actually quite exciting. And the first one is just the chemical neuroplasticity. And that means when you just start saying the affirmation to yourself and your brain starts to spew those beautiful chemicals that just indicate that there's a new communication happening between neurons that were not speaking to each other at first. So that's your chemical neuroplasticity. And then the next one is your structural neuroplasticity. So your structural neuroplasticity is now, because those neurons have been sharing chemicals, your brain is starting to notice, Zanele is finding this important.
Yay.
Let's actually just get together, make it easy. Because remember, your brain is already using 20% of your body's energy. So wherever there's an opportunity for a shortcut, your brain is going to do it. So that's structural neuroplasticity. But then the third one is probably the most exciting, is the functional neuroplasticity. And that's when your brain, even when you, and we see this with children who go through any kind of brain damage. We see it with individuals who have amnesia, where the brain will take certain functions and use a certain part of the brain. So almost reallocate real estate. Let's say, for example, you hurt a certain part of your brain in an accident, and your brain has noticed that, but it's also noticed that you're putting a demand on the brain to execute that thing or use that leg, even though, you've got damage in that certain area. So the brain will rewire and find a way where possible to reallocate that action or that function to somewhere else. But this is the biggest thing, is that most of us are not putting those demands on our brains. We're not doing that, but it is the demand, it is the command that then has the brain going, how do I support him? How do I support her? How do I support them? And that for me is the biggest thing. Never ever say that I can't. I've done this for too long. It's impossible. I've always had oats every morning. I'm not going to change.
There's no way I'm changing.
All those things. Just don't, because then you're setting off the chemical neuroplasticity in a different direction, right? Because it's those words that start off those chemicals going. So don't even say it. Like, that's the big thing to unlearn.
3 habits that you can never let go of, but have built you, the unlearning lady, the business, the work that you do. It pours into the organizations and the talent that you speak to. Just 3.
First one is I go to gym at least 3 times a week, without fail.
Yeah.
And that's just a no-brainer.
What does that do for you? Is it the releases the happy hormone?
Yes,
just structure.
Right? It's a part of it, but also it
Health
gives me
is wealth.
Release, right? Health is wealth. I get an opportunity to come out of work, get into the gym. I mean, I'm not a big socialite, so I can't say meet new people because that would be a lie. I'm trying not to meet new people. And so that would be the first one, hey? The second one is an internal business one, is our Money Mondays. We have me and our accounts manager have Money Mondays, where every single Monday we will sit and we will look at our money. One of the big things that we teach is attaching your goals to a temporal landmark within your calendar. Temporal landmarks are just those points within the calendar where your brain will relegate who it was and almost tell itself that you're a new person. Think about what happens on a Monday. You wake up and you're like, yes, let's go.
New energy.
Yes, let's do this. Even though you're the same version of yourself. But your brain is like, no, you're different.
It's different. Yeah.
So you use those, right? And that's what we do. Money Mondays. And so much so that I even use Money Mondays, in the business, and not just with my accounts manager, but also thinking about who's owing us money, who do we need to follow up with, how's this going, what are our accounts looking like? But I also use it in my personal sense. So I do something where I have my personal dashboards where I'm looking at, what I'm paying for, what are my accounts looking like,
what am I spending on?
What am I spending on? What am I not spending on? What am I looking to spend on in the future? All those types of things. And then I think the third one that for me is definitely something I'll always appreciate is I have my my routine of, I don't know if it's safe to say this, but
it is. It definitely is.
Is it safe?
Yeah, it's a safe space,
between
girl.
us.
Girl.
But I watch there's a particular show that I am addicted to, but I've watched it. I think I've watched the whole season probably not less than 10 times, Lou. I'm not even kidding.
I need to know what show it is.
No, but it's so quirky and
so
weird.
What?
I think people are going to judge me. I think they're going to judge me.
No, I promise I won't.
Okay, so it's Friends.
Okay, I've never watched it.
Don't.
But it's so good. My brother watches it.
It's so good.
Oh, addicted. Nah,
Lou, I'm so disappointed. How are you not watching? It's so good.
Okay,
so please do.
Yeah.
I have this routine where when I'm done with my day and I need a sense of familiarity and something to anchor me. It will always be that. Like I could even sit down and go, okay, then let's watch something new. Let's watch a movie. But I will always end up 10 minutes later going, I movie.
I trash TV.
Are you serious? That's your thing? So that's the third one, right?
I have to like it's a guilty pleasure. Guys, I work hard, but I enjoy that.
Exactly.
I enjoy
that's the
it.
thing, right? And that's what that last one does for me. Is it just helps me feel like I'm switching everything off and I'm anchoring myself to something that is predictable. Because even though I've heard the jokes so many times, they still make me laugh. Yeah. So yeah, those are my 3.
I can't wait. I hate that the conversation has to come to an end. But before I let you go, this has been so amazing. And personally, I'm learning a lot. I know that you are too. What is the one thing that you want to leave us with when it comes to, as we're in the process of just planning, goal setting, and sort of getting ready for the workplace? I know that some of us are in the workplace already. I mean, this is me at work. But what is the one thing that you can leave us with as we prepare to thrive in this year?
The one thing I would leave you with is something that I learned from a futurist. His name is Ari Wallach, and he talks about transgenerational empathy. We know empathy as, being kind to others,
putting yourself in somebody else's
their
shoes.
But transgenerational empathy, as he describes it, is being empathetic with others, but with yourself. But not just like that, but the different versions of those selves. We all know the quote by Maya Angelou, if you know better, you do better. Transgenerational empathy is saying, that version of me, I forgive that version of me, and I forgive the future version of me. And my dad And the things he may have done to hurt me, I forgive the past version of him, I forgive the future version of him, and the current version of him. Because I understand that he did what he did with what he had access to.
Yeah.
And that for me is one of the biggest things that it's such a beautiful practice. And if I was to leave your audience with anything, it would be that, is practice transgenerational empathy with others and with yourself.
I don't want anyone to ever say I haven't done anything good for them, because this conversation Zanele samletha la egoli sakhuluma into engaze ngizizwe. Oh, I love a Zulu girl. And unfortunately, we have come to the end of the episode. It has been a transformational conversation, and thank you so much for pouring your heart out. I know I've drank from Zanele's well of wisdom. I hope you have too. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Luyanda Khumbuza, and this has been the Enlightened Podcast. Till next time.